The wedding hall fell silent the instant the Duke lifted his crystal glass, not because he was about to toast his new bride, but because the most powerful nobleman in the room suddenly began laughing. "My lords," Duke Valor.
My lords, I suppose it's time to settle our little wager.
Lady Isolde Vailwyn had barely finished saying her vows when she noticed a heavy velvet purse, overflowing with gold coins, being tossed onto the banquet table. 1, 2, 3 different dukes added their own purses. The guests exchanged nervous glances. Then, one...
You actually married her! I did, and now every one of you owes me.
And now every one of you owes me. A wave of cruel laughter rolled through the magnificent candlelit ballroom as whispers spread from one aristocrat to another. He hadn't married for love. He hadn't married for duty. He had married because of a bet. A bet that he could force the proudest woman in the kingdom to become his wife, then publicly humiliate her before every noble family in England on the very day she became his Duchess. Every servant lowered their eyes. Every lady covered her mouth. Everyone expected the young bride to shatter into tears. Instead, Lady Isolde slowly smiled. Not the smile of a broken woman, the smile of someone who had been waiting for this exact moment. The Duke's confidence faltered. Why was she smiling? What could possibly make a woman smile after discovering her entire marriage was nothing more than a cruel game? She calmly reached for the wedding goblet. Then she spoke just 7 quiet words. "My Duke, shall we finish your little bet?" The laughter died instantly. Even the musicians stopped playing. For the first time that day, the Duke looked afraid. What secret did his new Duchess know that could terrify the most arrogant man in the kingdom? And how could a woman, everyone believed powerless, turn an entire ballroom against him in a single sentence? Stay with me. Because what happened next destroyed reputations, shattered alliances, and left one Duke begging for mercy before the sun had set. If you love historical Regency romance filled with shocking betrayals, powerful heroines, and unforgettable revenge, please subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and join us for the next chapter. Because the Duke thought he had won the bet, but he had no idea his bride was about to change his life forever. The silence became heavier than the stone walls of the grand hall. No one laughed anymore. Hundreds of eyes shifted between Duke Valor Ashcombe and his new Duchess, Lady Isolde Vailwyn. The Duke searched her face for pain, for anger, for tears. Instead, he found calm. It unsettled him more than any insult ever could. "You seem remarkably composed," he said, forcing a smile back onto his face. Isolde looked directly into his eyes. "I simply dislike disappointing people." Several guests exchanged confused glances. What did she mean? Valor took a slow step closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You've just learned that your marriage began with a wager." "And you've just learned," she replied softly, "that you don't know your own wife." His jaw tightened. She should have been humiliated. She should have run from the ballroom in tears. Instead, she stood straighter than before, every movement carrying the quiet confidence of a woman who refused to surrender the dignity no one could take from her. The orchestra cautiously resumed playing. Conversations slowly returned. One by one, the nobles pretended nothing unusual had happened, though everyone continued stealing glances toward the newly married couple. No scandal entertained the aristocracy more than a wedding gone wrong, especially when the groom himself had created it. The Duchess Dowager of Ashcombe, Lady Seraphine Ashcombe, watched everything from across the ballroom without speaking. Her silver hair was perfectly arranged beneath an elegant jeweled headdress, but concern shadowed her eyes. She knew her son better than anyone. Valor had always mistaken pride for strength. Ever since childhood, he had believed that losing was impossible. When he was 12, he challenged boys twice his age to horse races. When he was 16, he gambled away an entire year's allowance because he refused to admit defeat. As a man, that reckless pride had only grown richer with his title. And now, it had followed him to the altar. Seraphine's gaze shifted toward Isolde. The young woman carried herself differently from every noble lady she had ever met. She neither chased attention nor avoided it. She simply observed. She noticed which servants trembled when the Duke spoke. She noticed which noblemen avoided meeting her eyes after the wager became public. She noticed everything. That alone made Seraphine uneasy. People who watched carefully usually acted carefully. The old Duchess quietly whispered to herself, "Perhaps my son has finally challenged the wrong woman." Meanwhile, Lord Corwin Blackmere, one of the men who had joined the wager, leaned toward another duke with a grin. "The poor girl won't survive a month in Ashcombe Manor." His companion chuckled, "She'll either flee or break." Neither man noticed Isolde passing only a few steps behind them. She heard every word. She simply kept walking. Her expression never changed. As she crossed the ballroom, servants instinctively moved aside. Not because she demanded respect, because she carried herself like someone accustomed to command. Long before today, Isolde had understood something many nobles never learned. Real power rarely needed to announce itself. It spoke quietly. She remembered the lessons her late father had repeated throughout her childhood. Never reveal your strongest card while everyone is still looking at your hands. As a little girl, she never understood those words. As a duchess, she finally did. Across the room, Valor accepted congratulations from guests pretending to admire him. Each compliment fed his confidence once more. He convinced himself her smile had been nothing more than courage, masking heartbreak. Soon enough, reality would crush her. Ashcombe Manor would do the rest. The estate was enormous, respected throughout the kingdom, and governed entirely by his rules. Every servant answered to him. Every steward obeyed him. Every member of the household feared disappointing him. By tomorrow morning, his new wife would understand exactly who held power inside those walls. At least that was what he believed. Outside, dark clouds gathered over the countryside. Thunder rolled across the distant hills, though the rain had not yet arrived. Some older guests quietly crossed themselves. Storms on wedding days were often considered unfortunate omens. Others dismissed it as foolish superstition. Only Lady Seraphine continued watching the sky. Something about today's celebration felt wrong from the beginning. Not because of the wager, because fate seemed strangely patient. As the banquet continued, Isolde was introduced to influential families, wealthy landowners, judges, bishops, and military officers. She greeted each person with effortless grace. She remembered every name after hearing it once. She noticed old rivalries hidden behind polite smiles. She recognized alliances disguised as friendships. By the end of the evening, she knew more about Ashcombe society than most newcomers learned in years. Valor noticed it too. His wife asked very few questions, yet somehow she learned everything. How? That question lingered in the back of his mind, longer than he wished to admit. As the final course was served, Isolde looked through the tall palace windows, toward the road leading to Ashcombe Manor. Tomorrow, she would enter the Duke's home. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. She had survived his public humiliation without surrendering. But surviving one battlefield was very different from living inside the enemy's fortress. And somewhere deep inside that vast estate waited a truth no one in the ballroom had spoken aloud. A truth that explained why so many servants feared the Duke, and why his own mother looked at him with quiet disappointment instead of pride. The celebration finally came to an end long after midnight. The guests departed beneath a sky filled with rolling thunder, their elegant carriages disappearing into the darkness one after another. Inside the palace, the laughter had faded. Only whispers remained. Every servant who crossed paths with the newly married Duchess lowered their eyes, as though speaking to her would invite trouble. Isolde noticed it immediately. Fear had settled over this household long before she arrived. It lived in every hallway. It echoed in every careful footstep. Valor offered his arm without looking at her. "We leave for Ashcombe Manor at first light." She accepted his arm with quiet grace. "As you wish, your grace." Neither spoke another word. The carriage journey the following morning stretched for hours through forests, rivers, and endless green hills. The silence between them became almost unbearable. Valor stared through the window as though she were not sitting beside him. Isolde watched the countryside instead. Children waved as the Duke's carriage passed through villages. Farmers stopped working to bow. Women pulled their daughters closer to the roadside. The Ashcombe crest inspired respect everywhere. But respect was not the same as love. She noticed something else. No one smiled at the Duke. They obeyed him. They feared him. That difference mattered. By afternoon, the enormous gates of Ashcombe Manor appeared through the mist. The estate rose from the hills like a fortress. Its grey stone walls towered above ancient oak trees. Dozens of servants stood outside waiting in perfect lines. Stable boys hurried toward the horses. Housemaids stood with folded hands. The butler stepped forward the moment the carriage stopped. His hair had turned completely white with age. His back remained perfectly straight despite the years. "Welcome home, Your Grace." His voice was steady. Then he turned toward Isolde. A brief warmth softened his tired eyes. "Welcome to Ashcombe Manor, Your Grace." Before she could answer, Valor interrupted. "There will be changes." The servant stiffened. The old butler lowered his head. "What changes, Your Grace?" "My wife will not occupy the Duchess's chambers." Silence swept across the entrance. Several maids exchanged frightened glances. Even the footmen looked confused. The Duchess's chambers had belonged to every Lady Ashcombe for generations. "They are being prepared," the butler answered carefully. "I gave no such order." Valor's voice turned cold. "My wife will stay in the East Wing." The East Wing. Every servant knew what that meant. Cold rooms, old furniture, broken fireplaces, a section of the manor abandoned except for storage. The insult could not have been more public. Lady Seraphine stepped down from another carriage, just in time to hear him. "Valor," her tone carried quiet warning. "The Duchess belongs in the family chambers." He met his mother's eyes without hesitation. "I've made my decision. You shame your father. My father is dead, and yet his honor is still alive." For a brief moment, neither moved. The servants remained frozen. No one dared breathe. Then Valor looked away. "The matter is closed." He walked into the manor without waiting for his wife. Every servant instinctively followed him, except one. The old butler remained standing before Isolde. His face was filled with apology. "I am deeply sorry, Your Grace." She smiled gently. "There is no need. But the East Wing, I shall see it for myself." He hesitated. "As you wish." The walk through the manor felt endless. Portraits of former dukes lined the walls. Every generation appeared proud. Every face seemed to watch her pass. At last, the butler opened a heavy wooden door. Cold air rushed into the corridor. Dust floated through pale sunlight. The room inside was far worse than anyone had expected. The curtains were torn. The fireplace had long gone cold. The wallpaper peeled away from damp stone walls. Rain dripped slowly through one corner of the ceiling. A single narrow bed stood against the wall. Even the servants looked ashamed. One young maid quietly wiped tears from her eyes. "This room hasn't been lived in for years," she whispered. The butler silenced her with a glance. Isolde slowly stepped inside. She touched the old wooden table, ran her fingers across the dusty window. Then she turned around. "It will do." Every servant looked at her in disbelief. No anger, no complaints, no demands. She thanked them for bringing in her belongings before asking everyone except the young maid to leave. The girl remained standing near the door, nervously twisting her apron. "My name is Miss Elsinore, Your Grace. You may call me Isolde when no one else is listening." The maid's eyes widened. "I could never." "You could." A small smile finally appeared on the girl's face. It may have been the first genuine smile inside Ashcombe Manor that day. "I've served here since I was 10. And are you happy here?" The smile disappeared instantly. She lowered her eyes. "No, Your Grace." "Why not?" She looked toward the closed door before answering. "Because kindness doesn't survive long in this house." Those words lingered in the room long after she finished speaking. Before Isolde could ask another question, loud footsteps echoed through the hallway. The door burst open. Valor entered without knocking. His expression was colder than before. "You seem comfortable." "I've had worse." He frowned. "You should be angry." "Should I?" I expected tears. "I disappointed you again." His patience began to crack. "You still don't understand." "Then explain." He stepped closer until only inches separated them. "You are Duchess only in title. I decide where you sleep. I decide who speaks to you. I decide who enters this room. You have no authority here." The maid trembled behind them. Isolde remained perfectly still. She looked into his eyes without fear. "You've mistaken obedience for respect." His face hardened. "And you've mistaken this house for your own." Without another word, he turned toward the frightened maid. "If anyone assists the Duchess without my permission, they will leave Ashcombe Manor before sunset." The threat struck every servant like a blade. Elsinore's face turned white. She bowed quickly. "Yes, Your Grace." Valor walked away, slamming the door behind him. The room fell silent again. The young maid began crying softly. "I'm sorry. You've done nothing wrong. They'll dismiss me." Isolde gently took her shaking hands. No, you don't know his grace. I know enough. She looked toward the window, where dark clouds gathered above the estate. The battle had finally begun. Valor believed isolation would break her spirit. Instead, he had unknowingly handed her the one thing she needed. The servants had witnessed everything. They had seen the humiliation. They had seen her dignity. And for the first time in years, someone inside Ashcombe Manor had stood before the Duke without surrendering. What Valor failed to realize was that fear can rule people for a season, but hope spreads much faster. And somewhere inside the walls of that lonely manor, the first spark of change had already been lit, though neither the Duke nor his household yet understood how impossible it would be to extinguish. The next morning arrived with heavy rain beating against the old windows of the east wing. Water slipped through cracks in the ceiling and landed in small puddles across the worn wooden floor. Isolde had slept very little, not because the room was cold, because she had spent the entire night listening. Ashcombe Manor spoke in ways most people ignored. She heard servants rushing through distant corridors before dawn. She heard doors closing the moment the Duke's footsteps echoed through the house. She heard frightened whispers disappear whenever his name was spoken. By sunrise, she understood one thing. Fear had become the language of this estate. She refused to learn it. When Elsinore arrived carrying a simple breakfast tray, she looked exhausted. Dark circles rested beneath her eyes. "You hardly slept," Isolde observed. The young maid forced a smile. "I am well." "No." Elsinore hesitated before quietly answering. "The housekeeper questioned me for nearly an hour because you spoke with me." She nodded. "They wanted to know everything you said." "And what did you tell them?" "The truth." "And what is the truth?" "That you thanked me." For a brief moment Isolde closed her eyes. Even kindness had become suspicious inside this house. She reached for the tea and noticed it had gone cold. The bread was dry. The fruit had begun to spoil. No one would dare serve such a meal to the Duke. The insult was deliberate. Without complaint, she began eating anyway. Elsinore watched in disbelief. "You shouldn't accept this." "I accept nothing." The maid looked confused. "I'm simply eating breakfast." There was a difference. One kept her alive. The other surrendered her dignity. As they finished, loud voices echoed from the main courtyard below. Isolde stepped toward the window. Dozens of servants stood outside, while the estate steward shouted orders. An elderly gardener struggled to lift a heavy marble planter that clearly required two men. His hands trembled, his breathing became uneven. The steward struck the ground with a walking cane. "Move faster." The old man tried again. His knees gave way. The planter slipped. It shattered against the stone path. The sharp sound echoed through the courtyard. Everyone froze. Moments later, Valor appeared on the upper terrace, overlooking the servants. His face remained expressionless. "What happened?" The steward bowed. "Carelessness, Your Grace." The old gardener dropped to his knees. "It was an accident." Valor descended the stairs slowly. Every servant lowered their heads. He stopped before the trembling old man. "You've worked here for 30 years. 34, Your Grace. And now you destroy my property. My strength failed me." "No." Valor's voice remained calm. "Your usefulness failed you." He turned toward the steward. "Dismiss him." The words landed harder than thunder. The gardener's face lost all color. "My family lives on this estate." "Not anymore." "My grandson. They leave before sunset." The old man pressed his forehead against the wet stones. "Please." No one moved. No one spoke. Fear chained every witness in place. Then another voice broke the silence. "Your Grace." Every head turned. Isolde walked calmly into the courtyard, despite the rain soaking her dress. Valor's eyes narrowed. "I don't remember inviting you. I wasn't aware mercy required an invitation." Several servants gasped. No one had spoken to the Duke that way in years. She stopped beside the old gardener. "How much does the planter cost?" The steward answered quickly. 20 sovereigns. "I'll pay for it." Valor laughed softly. "You believe this concerns money. It concerns justice. He damaged my property. He served your family for 3 decades. He failed. He grew old." Those words lingered between them. For the first time, several servants dared to lift their heads. Valor looked around. He noticed something he had never seen before. People were watching him, not with fear, with expectation. They wanted to know what he would do. His pride refused to bend. The dismissal stands. He turned and walked away. The servants immediately scattered. No one wished to remain after witnessing the confrontation. The old gardener quietly wept. Isolde knelt beside him. "What is your name?" "Barnaby. You will not face this alone." He looked at her with disbelief. "No Duchess has ever spoken to me." She smiled gently. "Then perhaps it is time one did." By evening the story had spread through every corridor of Ashcombe Manor. The new Duchess had challenged the Duke before the entire household. The cooks whispered while preparing supper. The stable boys repeated every word. Even the laundry maids argued over whether she was brave or simply foolish. Lady Seraphine listened in silence as the rumors reached her drawing room. A faint smile appeared on her face. At last, someone had reminded the household that courage still existed. Later that night, she invited Isolde to tea. The room felt warmer than any other place inside the manor. Books filled every shelf. Fresh flowers rested beside the windows. It felt like a different world. "You remind me of someone," Seraphine said quietly. "Myself? No. My husband." She looked into the fire. "He believed power existed to protect people." She sighed. "Somewhere along the way, my son decided power existed to control them." Isolde listened without interruption. "You cannot change him overnight." "I don't intend to." "Then what do you intend?" She smiled thoughtfully. "To change the house." The older Duchess looked at her with growing respect. "That will be even harder, perhaps. But every house is built one stone at a time, and every broken house can be rebuilt the same way." For the first time since the wedding, Seraphine felt hope. Small, fragile, but real. Elsewhere in the manor, Valor stood inside his study, staring into the fireplace. Corwin Blackmere sat across from him with a glass of brandy. "You've made a mistake." Valor frowned. "In what way?" "You embarrassed her." "That was the point." "No." Corwin leaned forward. "You turned her into something dangerous." Valor laughed. "A woman isolated in the East Wing. A woman everyone is beginning to admire." The Duke's smile slowly disappeared. Outside his study, unnoticed by either man, one servant carrying firewood paused just long enough to hear every word before quietly slipping away into the darkness. By morning, the entire household would learn that even the Duke's closest friend believed the Duchess was becoming far more powerful than anyone had expected. And for the first time, Valor would begin to realize that winning a wager was far easier than controlling the consequences it had unleashed. The following afternoon, the rain finally stopped. Sunlight spread across the grounds of Ashcombe Manor, but it brought no warmth to the estate. The servants moved through the halls with unusual urgency. Something was happening. Isolde noticed it before anyone spoke a word. The kitchens prepared a banquet far larger than the household required. Silver polished until it reflected faces like mirrors covered every table. Fresh flowers arrived by the wagon. Expensive wine filled the cellar. She turned to Elsinore. "Who is coming?" The maid hesitated. The Duke invited the neighboring nobles. For what occasion? No one knows. But Isolde did. Valor was planning another performance. The wager had entertained his friends once. Now, he intended to prove that his wife had been completely broken. He wanted witnesses. As evening approached, elegant carriages once again rolled through the gates. Lord Corwin Blackmere arrived first. Then came earls, barons, judges, wealthy landowners, and their wives. Every guest expected another evening of amusement. Rumors had spread that the Duchess now lived in the abandoned East Wing. Many came hoping to see her humiliated again. Inside the drawing room, Valor welcomed every guest with effortless confidence. His smile had returned. Tonight, he intended to reclaim complete control. Lady Seraphine watched quietly from across the room. She sensed danger. Not for Isolde, for her son. She had seen that look in his eyes before. It always appeared just before he made a mistake he could not undo. When dinner was announced, everyone entered the magnificent dining hall. The Duke occupied the head of the table. The Duchess's chair had been placed far down the line, beside distant relatives, almost hidden from view. Another insult, another attempt to remind everyone of her place. A servant approached Isolde. "His Grace instructed us to seat you here." She smiled. "Thank you." Without another word, she walked past the chair. Every conversation stopped. She continued toward the opposite end of the table, toward the seat reserved for the Duchess of Ashcombe, since the estate had first been built. She gently pulled out the chair. Then she sat beside the Duke. The silence became absolute. Valor slowly turned his head. That seat was not assigned to you. It belongs to the Duchess. I assigned another, and I accepted the one history assigned. Neither looked away. Around them, no guest dared touch their food. Valor leaned closer. You test my patience. She answered just as quietly. No, I reveal it. His hands tightened beneath the table. Move. I will not. Every noble watched the confrontation with growing fascination. This was no longer a disagreement between husband and wife. It had become a battle for authority. Valor suddenly stood. His chair scraped loudly across the marble floor. I gave you an order. Isolde slowly rose as well. So did your ancestors when they created this house. The words struck harder than anyone expected. She turned toward the assembled guests. I apologize that your dinner has been interrupted. Her voice remained calm. But perhaps there is something every honorable family here should know. Valor's heartbeat quickened. She continued. When a man believes respect can be won through humiliation, he does not diminish the woman standing beside him. He diminishes the title he inherited. Several older nobles lowered their eyes. They knew she was right. The Duke publicly wagered on his own wedding. She looked around the room. Tell me, if a man laughs at the vows he speaks before God, what value will he place upon any promise afterward? No one answered. Corwin stared into his untouched wine. Even he could not defend that question. Valor felt the room slipping away from him. The admiration he expected had disappeared. For the first time in his life, silence judged him more harshly than words. His pride demanded he strike back. Enough. His voice echoed across the hall. You speak as though you are innocent. I never claimed innocence. You accepted this marriage. I honored it. You challenge your husband before his guests. I defend my marriage before those who mocked it. Again, no one spoke. The truth had become impossible to ignore. Valor looked toward his closest friends. None met his eyes. The laughter from the wedding day had vanished. Only discomfort remained. For one brief moment, doubt entered his heart. Had he truly gone too far? The feeling lasted only seconds before anger buried it again. He pointed toward the great doors. You are no longer welcome at this table. The room gasped. Lady Seraphine stood immediately. Valor. He ignored her. Leave. Isolde remained perfectly still. She looked around the hall one last time. Every servant watched from the walls. Every noble waited. Every frightened soul inside Ashcombe Manor wondered whether she would finally surrender. She took a slow breath. Leaving would protect her pride. Staying would protect something much greater. She made her choice. Instead of walking toward the doors, she removed the magnificent emerald necklace resting around her neck. It had belonged to her late mother. It was the last precious gift she possessed from her family. She placed it carefully upon the dining table. The emeralds shimmered beneath the candlelight. This necklace is worth more than the broken planter. She looked toward Barnaby, who had quietly entered the hall to serve wine despite his dismissal. It will provide for your family. The old gardener burst into tears. No, your grace. I cannot. You can. She smiled gently. My mother taught me that jewels, locked away in boxes, save no one. The sacrifice stunned the room. Everyone understood what she had given away. Not wealth, memory, love. The final piece of home she still carried. Lady Seraphine covered her mouth. Even Corwin lowered his head in shame. Valor stared at the necklace. Something inside him shifted. Not enough to change him, but enough to wound him. For the first time since their wedding, he realized his wife possessed something he had never been able to purchase. Character. And every person in the room had just witnessed it. No title, no fortune, no wager could compete with that. Without another word, Isolde turned and walked toward the doors. No servant tried to stop her. No guest looked away. As she disappeared into the corridor, something extraordinary happened. Barnaby stepped after her, then Elsinore, then another servant, then another, until one by one, nearly every servant in the hall quietly followed the Duchess out, leaving trays untouched and wine unpoured. The enormous dining hall suddenly felt empty, despite being filled with nobles. Valor remained standing at the head of the table, surrounded by wealth, power, and silence. He had won the wager, but in a single evening he had begun losing everything that truly mattered. And somewhere deep inside, a question he had spent his entire life refusing to ask finally forced its way into his mind. What if the weakest person in this marriage had never been his wife at all. The corridor outside the dining hall was silent except for the soft footsteps of the servants who had followed Isolde. She stopped beneath the tall windows overlooking the gardens and turned to face them. More than 30 people stood before her. Housemaids, footmen, kitchen workers, stable hands. Barnaby stood among them with tears still shining in his eyes. No one spoke. No one knew why they had followed her. They simply had. Isolde looked at each face. You should all return to your duties. No one moved. Barnaby stepped forward first. You stood for us when no one else ever did. Another servant nodded. You treated us like people. A cook wiped her eyes. We have served this house for years, but today was the first time we felt seen. Isolde smiled gently. Then promise me something. They listened carefully. Never abandon your responsibilities because of me. If Ashcombe Manor is ever to become a home instead of a prison, it will be because each of us chooses honor over fear. The servants slowly bowed their heads. Not because she demanded it, because she had earned it. One by one they returned to their work. Not as frightened people. As people carrying hope. Barnaby remained behind. He carefully held the emerald necklace in trembling hands. I cannot keep this. You can. It belongs to your mother. It belonged to a woman who believed kindness should never remain hidden. She gently closed his fingers around it. Use it to protect your family. The old gardener fell to his knees. For the second time that day. Only this time it was not because of fear. It was because gratitude had overwhelmed him. Inside the dining hall, the atmosphere had completely changed. No one cared about the feast anymore. Corwin finally broke the silence. You've lost them. Valor stared toward the open doors. They're servants. They're people. They'll obey. They always did. Corwin slowly stood. But obedience isn't loyalty. He placed his untouched wine glass upon the table. I warned you. Without waiting for another word, he walked away. Several nobles followed. Others quietly excused themselves. Within minutes, the magnificent banquet hall was nearly empty. The celebration meant to restore the Duke's reputation had accomplished the opposite. Lady Seraphine approached her son. For a long moment neither spoke. Finally she said quietly, Your father once told me that a ruler is measured by the people willing to stand beside him when he no longer has the power to command them. She looked toward the empty seats. Tonight, you received your answer. She left him standing alone. The silence around him felt unbearable. For the first time since inheriting his title, Valor realized that the manor itself had changed. Not the walls, not the furniture, the people. The fear that had controlled them for years now shared space with something new. Hope. He hated that feeling. Because he could not control it. That night he wandered through the dark corridors unable to sleep. As he passed the servants' quarters, he heard quiet laughter. Soft, careful, almost afraid to exist. Yet it existed anyway. He had not heard laughter in that part of the manor for years. He continued walking. Outside, he found Barnaby's small cottage, still lit by candlelight. The old gardener embraced his grandson, while his daughter cried with relief. The emerald necklace rested safely inside a small wooden box. Valor watched through the window for several seconds before turning away. Something tightened inside his chest. He told himself it was anger. Deep down he knew it was shame. Meanwhile, Isolde sat alone beside the cracked window in the east wing. The room remained cold. The rain had returned. She reached for the place around her neck, where her mother's necklace had always rested. Her fingers found only empty skin. For the first time since entering Ashcombe Manor, tears filled her eyes. Not because she regretted giving it away, because it truly was gone. She closed her eyes and remembered her mother's voice. A precious heart is worth more than precious stones. She whispered those words to herself, until the ache became bearable. A gentle knock interrupted the silence. Lady Seraphine entered, carrying a folded blanket and a small wooden box. I thought your room might still be cold. Isolde quickly stood. You shouldn't trouble yourself. It is no trouble. The older Duchess placed the blanket across the bed. Then she handed over the wooden box. Inside rested an old silver brooch, shaped like a blooming rose. It belonged to my grandmother. Isolde looked up in surprise. I cannot accept this. You are not replacing what you lost. You are beginning something new. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. Then Seraphine gently took Isolde's hands. You reminded this family what dignity looks like. My son may never thank you, but one day he will remember. Isolde smiled through quiet tears. I did not come here to defeat him. I know. I came here hoping we might someday become worthy of the vows we already spoke." Those words stayed with Seraphine long after she returned to her own chambers. Elsewhere, Valor remained alone in his study until dawn. The wager money still rested inside the velvet purse upon his desk. He stared at it for hours. The gold had seemed like victory only days before. Now it looked strangely worthless. Without thinking, he swept the purse into the fireplace. The coins scattered into the flames. He watched them disappear without satisfaction. Nothing inside him felt lighter. Some victories demanded a price far greater than they were worth. Morning arrived quietly over Ashcombe Manor. The servants greeted one another with cautious smiles. Barnaby remained on the estate after several workers volunteered to share their wages until he found new employment. No one had asked permission. They simply chose compassion. Even Elsinore walked with greater confidence than before. The house itself seemed to breathe differently, not because fear had vanished, because courage had finally found a place beside it. Valor looked from his study window as Isolde crossed the gardens, carrying a basket of fresh bread toward Barnaby's cottage. She did not know he was watching. She expected no praise, no audience. She simply kept her promise. He had married her to win a cruel wager. He had tried to humiliate her before the entire aristocracy. He had stripped her of comfort, status, and honor inside his own home. Yet somehow, every wound he inflicted had revealed her strength instead of her weakness. For the first time in his life, the Duke understood that respect could never be forced. It could only be earned. Whether he possessed the humility to earn it remained uncertain. But Ashcombe Manor would never return to the way it had been. The servants had changed. His mother had changed. Even he had begun to change, though he fought it with every part of his pride. And as Isolde disappeared into the morning light, carrying nothing except kindness and unwavering resolve, she realized that true victory had never been about defeating her husband. It had been about refusing to let his cruelty decide the kind of woman she would become. That choice, more than any title or fortune, was the greatest inheritance she would ever leave behind. Several months passed, and the seasons quietly changed around Ashcombe Manor. The roses that had once bloomed beneath the windows faded with summer and returned again with autumn. The servants no longer lowered their heads every time footsteps echoed through the corridors. They still respected the Duke, but the fear that had ruled the estate for years no longer held every heart captive. Something had changed, not because laws had been written, because one woman had refused to surrender her dignity. Isolde changed as well. The timid bride many expected to break on her wedding day no longer existed. She walked through the manor with quiet confidence, speaking kindly to everyone she met, from the oldest steward to the youngest kitchen maid. She learned the names of every child born on the estate. She knew which families struggled through winter, and which workers hid illnesses because they feared losing their wages. Without announcing it, she began solving problems one by one. An empty storage building became a small school where servants' children learned to read. The neglected gardens were restored, providing food for families who had often gone hungry during difficult seasons. The East Wing, once abandoned and forgotten, slowly became the warmest place in Ashcombe Manor. People gathered there not because they were ordered to, because they felt welcome. Even Lady Seraphine often spent her afternoons there, watching children laugh where silence had once lived. Sometimes, she simply watched Isolde from across the room. The young Duchess never realized she was being observed. She worked without seeking recognition. That, Seraphine believed, was the purest form of leadership. Valor noticed every change. At first he fought it. He issued new orders. The servants obeyed politely. Yet something strange kept happening. They no longer obeyed because they feared punishment. They obeyed because they believed the estate itself deserved better. That realization disturbed him more than open rebellion ever could. One evening, he entered the old library, expecting complete silence. Instead, he found Barnaby reading aloud to several servants' children. The old gardener looked healthier than he had in years. His grandson sat proudly beside him. When Barnaby noticed the Duke standing in the doorway, he slowly rose. The children immediately became nervous. To everyone's surprise, Valor spoke quietly. "Please continue." Barnaby hesitated. Then he continued reading. Valor remained standing for several minutes before quietly leaving. No one spoke about it. But the children remembered. It was the first time they had ever seen the Duke walk away, without bringing fear into a room. Anja, Azine Veli. Change rarely arrived like thunder. Sometimes, it arrived as quietly as that. Weeks later, a messenger arrived carrying official documents from the royal court. The entire household gathered as the seal was broken. The letter announced that the crown had received repeated reports, praising the remarkable transformation of Ashcombe Manor. The estate, once known for harsh discipline and unhappy workers, had become an example of fairness throughout the county. Inspectors had spoken with villagers, merchants, clergy, and laborers. Every road led to the same name, not the Duke, the Duchess. The officials wished to honor Lady Isolde for improving the lives of hundreds without demanding recognition. The great hall fell silent. Valor slowly looked toward his wife. She appeared genuinely surprised. "I never asked for this." Lady Seraphine smiled softly. "That is precisely why you received it." The servants burst into applause. Many openly cried. Elsinore covered her mouth as tears rolled down her cheeks. Barnaby simply looked toward the ceiling and whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude. Valor did not clap. He stood motionless. Inside him, pride battled truth one final time. He could continue pretending he had built everything around him alone, or he could finally acknowledge the woman he had tried so hard to destroy. That evening, he asked Isolde to meet him in the same grand ballroom where their wedding celebration had ended in humiliation. The candles burned quietly. The room stood empty, no guests, no musicians, no audience. Only the two of them. For several moments neither spoke. Finally, Valor broke the silence. "I have replayed that day in my mind more times than I can count." She remained still. "I believed power meant never admitting I was wrong." His voice grew heavier. "I spent my life proving I could conquer everyone around me." He lowered his eyes. "But I never learned how to conquer myself." The confession hung between them. It was not dramatic. It was painfully honest. He reached into his coat, not with a purse of gold, not with another wager. Instead, he placed a small velvet box upon the table. Inside rested the silver wedding ring he had removed shortly after their ceremony, believing the marriage meant nothing beyond winning a bet. "I should never have taken this off." His hands trembled. "I cannot erase what I did. I cannot return the years I stole from people who feared me. I cannot undo your humiliation. But if forgiveness is something that must be earned." He looked into her eyes. "Then I wish to spend the rest of my life earning it." Isolde remained silent for a long time. The hurt had not disappeared. Some wounds healed slowly. Others left scars forever. She stepped closer. "I forgive you." Hope appeared in his eyes. Then she gently continued. "But forgiveness does not erase consequences." His smile faded. "You will have to live differently. I know. You will have to become the man your father hoped you would be. I will try." "No." She smiled softly. "You will do it." For the first time since their wedding, she placed her hand in his. Not because he was a duke, because he had finally chosen humility over pride. Outside the ballroom doors, Lady Seraphine quietly wiped away tears before walking back down the corridor without disturbing them. Months later, Ashcombe Manor held another celebration. This time there were no wagers, no cruel laughter, no hidden humiliation. Barnaby officially returned as head gardener. Elsinore became mistress of the household staff after years of faithful service. Families who had once feared eviction now received permanent homes on the estate. Children laughed freely through the gardens. Music filled the halls again. When the Duke and Duchess entered together, every servant and guest stood, not because protocol demanded it, but because respect had finally replaced fear. As the evening drew to a close, Valor quietly whispered to Isolde, "You shocked me on our wedding day." She laughed softly. "I only showed you what was always possible." He smiled. "No, you showed me who I could become." Sometimes the greatest revenge is not destroying the person who hurt you. Sometimes it is becoming so unwavering in kindness, courage, and dignity that their own conscience becomes impossible to escape. The Duke placed a bet to humiliate his wife. Instead, he lost his arrogance, found his humanity, and discovered that the greatest victory in life is never won over another person. It is won over the darkness within ourselves. Did you expect the Duke to change, or were you hoping the Duchess would leave him forever? If you had been standing in that ballroom on their wedding day, would you have forgiven him after everything he had done? Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. Your time and support truly mean the world to this channel. If this story touched your heart, surprised you, or reminded you that kindness is often stronger than cruelty, please subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next unforgettable historical romance. There are many more powerful stories waiting for you, and I would love for you to be part of this growing community.